Welcome, everyone, to the 1867 Sports Show, episode number Patrick Roy, if you're the English speaking community, or Roi in La Belle Provence. Kyle,
You
how you
know,
doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Episode 33 tonight. And obviously, Patrick Roy doesn't have a really big tie in, but we had to mention it because he's Canadian. But I was just thinking, I think after today's cuts that were made in the NFL, we can make a 33rd NFL franchise with all the Canadians that are now free agents.
Yeah, no kidding. It was like Black Tuesday for our brethren south of the border there.
It was not a good day to be a Canadian in the NFL. It really wasn't. And a lot of surprises, to be honest, because I mean, we're talking about players who've been in the league for a number of years. And again, we're not saying that they're cut outright. They could still be allotted to practice squads, things of that nature. They could be traded, whatever it may be. But cut day was in the NFL was today. Rosters had to be down to 53 players at 4 p.m. And yeah, some notable names from the Canucks side of things that were let go. So just kind of rattling them off as we go that were let go today. Theo Benedette from Chicago, Lual Ugayak from Tampa Bay. So how do you like that one, by the way?
I'm flabbergasted.
You would have absolutely butchered that.
Wait till we get to some of our segments later. There's some mouthfuls coming our way, buddy.
We're saving it. We're saving that one for later. But Javon Campbell by Jacksonville, again, huge surprise. Matthew Betts by Detroit,
who had some absolute highlights in the
yeah,
preseason too. So yeah, I don't know what was going on there.
yeah. And again, another big surprise. Luigi Villain, Ottawa product, cut from Carolina today.
Because if there's one prospect cupboard that is overflowing with talent on both sides of the football, it is the Carolina Panthers, ladies and
Of
gentlemen.
course, yes, the Carolina Panthers are very plentiful for prospects, and of course, we were saying they're very tongue in cheek. But Dakota Shepley, who's been a regular on the Dallas Cowboys offensive line the last couple of years, so again, shocking to see his name out there. Kyle Hergel, who was the first pick by the Saskatchewan Roughriders in this latest CFL draft, he was cut by New Orleans today. Again, not a lot of people know this, but Brett Rippon, quarterback for the Chicago Bears, obviously played for Denver. His uncle is the decent, not great, but decent Mark Rippon from the Washington.
The good enough.
Yeah, from the Washington Super Bowl teams from back in the late 80s, early 90s. Recent draft pick Aneem Dankwa, who we talked about on the Combine episode, the largest human being in the NFL, was cut by your Philadelphia Eagles today. Niccolo Kalanick, who is a tight end, was cut by the LA Rams. And probably the most shocking one of all, Neville Gallimore, cut from Miami today. So instant reactions to all of I mean, obviously you've touched on a couple of them already, but instant reactions to those cuts that were made today.
Well, I don't know if this is a harbinger of things to come, like they're anticipating Trump's going to win the election and immigration. He's deporting everyone. They're just getting a jump start on this or what, but it was who's left at this point? Is it Theo Johnson on the Giants and that's about it? Like, is it easier to run through those that didn't get cut today or what?
I think talking with Dave Naylor last week, he kind of put things in perspective because we've never seen this many Canadians in the NFL across the board, right? I think what he was saying is there was 40 in training camps, which is, a great number. So just off that list, I mean, obviously there's some surprises there, but you think about the rest of the players who either made their rosters or are being, moved to another roster, right? Before getting cut. I think Canada's still in very good shape in regards to their representation in the NFL. Now, is this a good sign? No. But as far as, a league like the CFL is concerned, this could actually reap a lot of benefits because now you're going to get an influx of non-imports who are potentially coming back and going to their respective teams that hold their rights. So,
if ever there was a time to get their lives together and get a 10th team, like, look, it's literally the equivalent of just taking an entire roster and just being like, here we go, boys, like Quebec City, Halifax, whatever you want to do. But Yeah, it was shocking to see how many, and like you alluded to earlier, that doesn't mean every single one of the guys that we just mentioned is coming north of the border. A lot of them will hop on with another team. I'm sure, like Neville's probably already on the phone with someone right now, and
Yeah,
he'll get another look and all of that. But yeah, it obviously doesn't bode well for Canadian football that all these guys just got released. But that being said, it doesn't mean that their careers are over whatsoever.
no,
They're going to hop on, whether it's with a CFL team, whether it's a UFL team, whether it's with a practice squad. They're all going to find homes, and I think the bigger takeaway is, like Naylor was saying, how many guys were actually on rosters up until this point, right?
yeah,
And we're probably some of the last, and I think in a few of their cases, like Betts and Gallimore and whatnot, like the hardest cuts to make on those
yeah,
teams. It's not just like, oh, okay, well, we needed some training camp bodies to, get run over by our first round prospects for a couple of weeks here. Like these were guys who are legitimate professionals and they're going to land on their feet somewhere. But yeah, knee jerk reaction, not great, Kyle.
but again, we'll say congrats to the Canadians and golf clap to the Canadians who do make their respective rosters after the cut line today. It's obviously a very stressful day for those guys who are on the bubble. I mean, you don't know whether your life's gonna change completely, or whether you got to pick up, and move to another city, or whether you got to pack it in for the rest of your life, right? So it's a very stressful day. So to those who made their respective rosters, congratulations. Those who didn't, again, Kyle just mentioned, there are brighter days ahead. There's a lot of talent out there that is just waiting to be picked up, whether that is by NFL teams, whether that is a UFL team, or again, I'm sure the homecoming would be very, very rampant for a lot of these gentlemen if they were to come back up here. So, anyways, on to bigger and better things. And let's hope that these guys can, pick up the pieces.
Yeah. Well, speaking of going from one team to another, if you heard or not, but Mr. Danny Jansen had himself a historic night on the ball diamond there with the Boston Red Sox. I guess, is he a partial winner? Like, no matter how that game played out, he was going to be on the right side of history one way or another there, or what?
Is this safe to say that this will never happen again?
Not well, I mean, it's exceptionally rare. If you were to, try and get some nerd to calculate the
Anytime we talk numbers, you got to be a nerd who does it.
yeah, gotta be a number nerd here. Not even one of those science guys either.
Not even one of them science guys.
You
Don't
need
get
a
me started.
mathematizer to really put this together.
Don't get me started on all them numerals and such.
Yeah, like it would literally only ever work again with a with a delay that was significant enough. And the weirdest part is the fact that they were division rivals, so you would
Yeah,
expect them to have had a series between now and when it actually got postponed. But yeah, for it to be postponed, to be made up later, and then the trade deadline passes, and then you end up on that team, and you stayed healthy enough for it to all, and you got the manager to buy in to put you back into the game. Yeah, a betting man, probably not in my lifetime, but when I was thinking about it, like just 162 games a year, and baseball's been around for what? Professionally, 130 years?
since 1840, I believe.
It's a long time. That's from before Canada right there. So yeah, like it was almost a little bit shocking just that had never happened before, where it's like, oh, old Pudge Sludgeworth over here got flipped.
Pudge Sludgeworth.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
they always had rhyming nicknames back in the day there. Like got flipped over to the Barons at the trade deadline or something because, the World Fair came to town and they couldn't finish the game on time or whatever. But
here's Charles Big Moose Jackson.
so so for those who have been living under a rock and still don't know what the hell we're talking about here, let's rewind a quick second here. So
We should probably preface our conversations and thoughts with actual topics.
yeah. Danny Jansen, originally member of the Toronto Blue Jays, was playing against the Boston Red Sox. Game got delayed. This was on June 26th. Trade deadline comes around. Toronto goes, hey, we're not going anywhere anytime fast. Side note, are all of a sudden world beaters all of a sudden here.
Yeah, 100%. I think that all Toronto needed to do was just trade their entire roster, and they're good.
Yeah.
They're fine now. They're good.
Look at them. But we digress.
Yes.
Flipped to Boston. Boston on August 26th is now making up the game against Toronto. Danny Jansen was at bat, so Dalton Varsho actually had to pinch hit. So during warmups, it actually said at bat for Toronto, Danny Jansen,
Yeah.
catching Danny Jansen.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that had he had one more strike, he technically could have been catching his own strikeout.
Yeah.
He's wild.
He's a time traveler.
Yeah, wild.
But anyway, so the long and short of it is he is now the first player in Major League history to have appeared by a technicality in the same game for both teams. So Toronto goes on to win 4-1. So that's what I said. Is he 1-1 in that scenario there? Because technically he lost as a member of the Red Sox, or what?
It's kind of like when you make a parlay, but you're betting on the same game. So you bet for one team to win, and then you bet for the other team to win as well. You're going to win either way.
Yeah. I mean, does that also go for the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest at bat? Because technically 2 months he was up there just fouling off pitches, just waiting.
It's like the home run derby, though. They don't actually count the strikes unless you swing.
And he's taking a nap.
Yeah, just no cuts for 2 months. Just standing up there, feet are just absolutely been asleep since June 27th. Yeah. And we're just on autopilot. But yeah, pretty cool event to happen, because you think about the rarity of something like that to happen. It probably would have done, probably would have gone on back in the 1800s when there were only a handful of teams, right? Oh, and so got hurt, and we only have 9 guys roster. We have no one to play the field. Well,
Pudge Sludgeworth coming up.
Pudge Sludgeworth will just hop right in there, and he'll be the utility man for the other team. So, in that scenario, you would think that it could potentially happen. But now that we're at the stage of where we're at, with 30 plus teams, with a full 162 game season, with 25-man rosters, this is not going to happen again. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to happen again. So the fact that it did, the fact that, like you were mentioning, everyone bought in, managers, coaches, players, everything, it just made for a really cool scenario. And again, Danny Jansen obviously had a very good career with Toronto. I think he's probably the player that people miss the most that was moved out. So kind of a nice way to kind of tie that little thing off with a bow, to say, there you go, there's your send off, Danny. The last series that you'll have with Toronto this season. And just really cool moment for both him and the ball club.
What odds will you give me if I say I want to bet on this happening again sometime in the next 10 years? I'm fishing for the Kevin Malone. If anyone ever gives you 10,000 to 1 odds, you take it.
If John Mellencamp ever wins an Oscar, I'm going to be a very rich man. I don't know. I'd probably give you 50 to 1.
Oh, that's horrible odds. You can keep it. You can keep it. Unbelievable. But that being said, I think
I'm confident, but I also don't want to give you any money. That's kind of where my conundrum is.
Yeah, I think where it ultimately lies is, I think it was such a weird anomaly that it could have even happened. It wasn't ever on anyone's radar, but now that someone's seen it, like it's like the 4-minute mile. No one ever ran a 4-minute mile. It's physically impossible. Someone does it, and then within a month, I think like 8 guys had done it. So who knows? It could be one of those factors. But yeah, golf clap to Danny Jansen, playing for both teams there. That's one way to make sure you get a W at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Just cheating the system. We love it.
Yeah. You know who could have used a W today? And I know you're excited for me to already say our good friend Felix's name here. But yeah. Mr. Felix Auger Aliassime. which, which just made Kyle's life complete right there.
No, no, would he be
Felix
the same
AA, as I like to
would
call him in
would
the
would,
Skinner household.
or fa, but would that be the equivalent of Felix Auger Aliassime?
Yeah, sure, him too. I think I think they grew up together. They might have been
Oh my
neighbors or
god.
something.
I absolutely love hyphenated names whenever you have to say them on the show. It is my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? We're only talking about Smiths and Johnson.
You need to run these things by me beforehand, and I will phonetically write them out for you and hold them up in front of my camera so that way when you're reading them out.
No, no. I'm committed to the bit at this point.
Oh, I love it. Anyways, continue.
Anyways, didn't have a great time on the court today there. Bounced in the first round. Unranked in the US Open there as well, too. So Jacob Mensick, easier last name, despite the fact that there were like umlauts and whatnot over it.
Umlauts. Oh.
Yeah, but and not only that, but lost in straight sets as well, too. So obviously disappointing, especially given the Olympics that he had there, where
Yeah.
he ended up fourth place in singles and ended up bringing home a bronze in mixed doubles. But kind of brought up a topic because don't know if based on that pronunciation you realized or not, we don't talk a lot of tennis on this show, and
Clearly.
yeah, clearly, and B, you know what, we were going back and forth about the fact that we thought that we, or at least we're kind of marketed that we're in this golden age of young tennis talent coming out north of the border. And to a degree, absolutely. You look at some of the names out there, you know, Layla Fernandez and some of the others, it's really going to be
What's Dennis's name?
Shapovalov. But like all of them are still 25 or under, right?
Yeah.
Or not saying by any stretch of the imagination that, oh, washed, right? But, you know, we kind of did see this to a degree with, you know, Milos Raonic, and we had also Bianca, who ended up winning the US Open back in the day as well, too. But we kind of thought that they would be more frequent into the quarterfinals, semifinals, and whatnot. So it's been fairly inconsistent on the world stage for Canada's next wave of tennis talent. So, in terms of the big picture of where Canadian tennis players lie right now, you giving them kind of a hey, you know, the future is still very bright. Are you quasi disappointed in performances to date, or do you think maybe they were a little bit too much hype too soon? Where do you fall on that spectrum in terms of their career achievements thus far?
I'm kind of like a bag of bits and bytes, honestly, when it comes to this. There's a little bit of everything. Because I think with some talent, yes, I think the hype was probably thrown on them a little bit too much. You're talking about the Eugenie Bouchards and the Bianca Andreescu's. You know, a great performance in one tournament does not a career make.
Yeah.
And I think people got way too excited too fast and didn't put things in perspective. Like these are young women who are really trying to kind of take that next step up. And rarely do you see that with all the domination that's been happening on the women's side, right? Because you had Serena and Serena. and now, I mean, obviously you've got some very good players as well, but you know, there was, I think, talk of, look, you know, you have the Osakas who they were great, but then stepped away, and now Coco Gauff is, you know, showing flashes, but then is, you know, kind of getting beat in, you know, straight sets in certain tournaments as well. So there's a lot of potential for the women's division right now to open up for these young prospects. And I mean, not to say that Eugenie or Bianca are young prospects anymore, but I think that's why a lot of people were putting a lot of hype on that type of talent. But yeah, I think it was too much too soon. And I think even Bianca Andreescu's come out and said, like, there was a time where I just fell out of love with tennis because the pressure got to be too much after that win. Mm-hmm. And I get it. Like that's a real thing. So in that sense, yes, I think the hype was too much. The other, you know, one of the other ones I'm looking at is, you know, this is just an overreaction because I'm looking at Felix, you know, kid's still really young. What is he, 22, 23?
No.
He's had great showings on the world stage of the Olympics. Obviously, he's played at a very high level. He's actually played very well against top talent. So you look at his record against top 10 participants across tournaments and whatnot, it's actually pretty good. And I think if you look at his career where it's progressing, he definitely has that career trajectory where you could say this guy has potential to be a multi-major winner, right? So I think a lot of people are kind of looking into, oh well, what's wrong with him? Nothing. Like every top player has an off tournament, and I think after what happened to him in Cincinnati, where there was a very questionable call, I think that again, tennis is a very unique sport like golf. One instance can really mess with you mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not 100% mentally focused on what you're doing, things like this happen. So if he can just kind of get things back on track and just kind of snap back into it for his next tournament, I think he'll be fine. And I think that he has a long, successful career ahead of him. And yeah, as far as the third end of that spectrum is, it's like, you know, I look at a guy like Denis Shapovalov, and I look at where he's probably best suited to be a winning tennis player. And I think he's just being miscategorized right now. Who's the most successful Canadian tennis player before Milos Raonic? Daniel Nestor, right? What did Daniel Nestor specialize in?
Wasn't it doubles?
It was doubles, exactly. I think Denis Shapovalov honestly has a very good career ahead of him if he were to make the transition to be a full-time doubles player and a part-time singles player. That's just my perspective. I'm not a tennis player. I don't have the body to be a tennis player. But I do have an opinion. I think that's
you look like one of those umpires that can sit in that little chair there and just cast judgment on everything.
Yeah, his stern glance is about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, from what I kind of see, where doubles players excel and succeed, they have to be obviously very agile and they have to have a very quick hand-eye coordination. And I see those things with Shapovalov every time I do watch tennis. Where I see a lot of people struggle when I watch it, when they're playing singles, is that they lose that focus, right? It's a long grind. Like some of these games, I think that's why you see the Djokovic's, the Nadal's, the Federer's, like they have those mental edges for every opponent that they play because they just know how to get through the tough part of every match. When you have a young tennis player who doesn't know how to get past that, that's when you start to see, oh, well, they're playing really well, and then there's the decline. Mm-hmm. So when I look at those three examples, that's the kind of tale of three, Canadian perspectives from the tennis side of things that I really think people should be looking at a little bit more intently instead of casting too much judgment.
Yeah. And again, number one, I'm not convinced that you're any better at saying these names. I think you just say them faster and with more confidence than I do.
It's all about confidence, man. If you don't have confidence, you're not going to be successful.
But number two, I think it really is just a matter of Canadians are so starved for that homegrown star, right?
Yeah.
Like we haven't had that prolonged, oh, okay, you know what? Whether it was Agassi or Sampras or whoever that was just at the top of the game dominating, we'd be like, yeah, he's one of ours, right? That anytime someone bursts onto the scene and has even a quasi deep run, like we're too quick to anoint them the next ones, right? And especially in an individualized sport where there can only be one winner out of fields of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, depending on the size of the tournament there. Like it's not realistic to think that we're going to have the ability to get these people to the top of the pyramid every single time, right?
Yeah.
How many professional tennis players are out there that have made millions of dollars over the course of their career but have never won a tournament? A lot of them, right? You can carve out an actual living out there with a whole lot of top 10 finishes and this, that, and the other. So
it's like golf. Like individual sports, people don't realize how lucrative they actually are.
Yeah.
Race car driving, golf, tennis.
If only I was better at making left turns, man, I would have been good at that NASCAR circuit there. More of a righty myself, though. So If ever there's a NASCAR event in Australia where they go around the opposite side, that's my bread and butter. But
Kyle Skinner, the Derek Zoolander of the NASCAR circuit.
yeah, Amby Turner.
I can turn left.
But really, like you look at it kind of on a timeline, it's I don't blame the athletes. I blame kind of the media and everyone putting all of this pressure on them, right? Because
Always the media. Always the media.
yeah, us talking heads, unbelievable. But 2021, right? You've obviously got Layla mania going on at the US Open, right? 2019, Bianca wins the US Open. 2016, Milos is a finalist at Wimbledon. And every time I hear, Milos Raonic's name, it's a Seinfeld, another game for Milos. But, and then, Dennis had 4 awards given to him in 2017 from brightest young star on the circuit, top Canadian male tennis player. Like they were tripping over themselves to hand him awards. And other than a semi-final appearance at Wimbledon in 2021, first, second, or third round exits at pretty much every tournament. So to your point, right? Like was it more so that he was the one and injuries have derailed him, kind of like Bianca, obviously, like she's someone who can point towards the injury bug really having an effect on kind of derailing that trajectory. But Dennis, it's more like, well, you got hot for a tournament, and I think you are maybe kind of what we're seeing here, and maybe you are better suited for a doubles or something like that, or a mixed doubles or whatever. But it really is just too much, too fast, too soon. Jeannie Bouchard, like she's pretty much out of the sport altogether at this point. And this isn't someone who's 45 years old that we're talking about here. Like this is someone who could easily still be competing, but I think fell out of love with the sport because of the amount of pressure that got put on her. So yeah, I'm not sure what the simple solution is, but if I'm to kind of put myself on that spectrum, I'm kind of halfway in the middle of disappointment and, being sold a false bill of goods at this point, where I think that the talent was there, but expecting them to be the next Federer or Djokovic or Nadal just happen to be coming from north of the border, maybe not realistic, right? Like everyone doesn't need to be MVP. You can still go out there and carve out an exceptional career being a third line checker or, a backup quarterback or whatever. And for a country that's 1/10 the size of our friends south of the border, there's a reason why they're cranking out the Coco Gauffs and the Andy Roddick's of the world that are actually reaching that mountaintop at a much higher degree than we are.
Yeah. Basically what you're saying is we need to go full Richard Williams and we need to just take over our daughters' lives and turn them into tennis players, whether they like it or not.
Yeah. And for those that are wanting a quick synopsis of King Richard, the film, and Will Smith's legendary performance in that, Kyle and I actually broke that down on an episode of the Dying Sports podcast. So you can go out and check that one out. But
you know what?
Yeah, clearly not hitting enough tennis balls at girls in the pouring rain is what's happening here.
That was such a podcast inception moment right now because we're on the 1867 Sports Show talking about an episode that we did on the Dying Sports podcast, which was a takeaway from the Front Office podcast.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Golf clap for you for the podcast inception moment just now.
It's onions, just layers.
Levels, Jerry.
Levels, Jerry. Levels. But again, right? Am I sounding the alarm bell? No, right? Layla's ranked 24th in the world. Felix is ranked 19th in the world. They've still got bright futures. Everyone we've talked about, minus Milos, who's I think 33 or something like that, is 25 or under. So they've got tons of time. They're not even in the primes of their career yet. But you look at like the Carlos Alcaraz of the world there, where it's like, you seem to have done a whole heck of a lot with your high school years there. It is easy to get lost in the comparison game, but tennis, let's call it what it is. Tennis is not at the level of seriousness in Canada that it is in some of these European countries where they've got entire academies devoted to it and practicing 365 days a year. We don't have that ability to even do that in Canada. They all ship down to IMG Academy in Florida.
Until the Dying Sports Group creates its own tennis academy in-house and we'll
You're the
start that
line
up.
judge, and Will Smith is just firing balls at these kids here.
I will be the most judgmental person you've ever met in your life, and I'll get them in
Stern
shit
dad
shape.
looks left, right, and center. Oh my goodness. Anyways, well,
For those of you keeping track, that's job number 792 that I registered Kyle for. So
to date, I have started none. Follow through. Bit of an issue here on this show.
it's a good to-do list, and you're just kind of picking your time.
Yeah, it's a long game that we're playing here. But speaking of games that take a long time to play,
look at you. I love these transitions, man.
Little event coming up north of the border, which is always nice to see when the PGA's biggest and brightest stars end up coming to Canada, right? Like obviously the Canadian Open attracts some of that talent, but outside of that, few and far between do Canadian golf fans get to see the best golfers in the world at the peak of their powers up close and personal. So President's Cup is coming to the Royal Montreal Golf Club September 24th to 29th. And someone we've talked about on this show a few times, good old Mikey Weir versus the world, is actually captain for the international team. So before we get into this, I'm going to do a better job of this segment than we did with Danny Jansen. And for those that are saying, well, what the heck is the President's Cup? The President's Cup is essentially the best golfers in the world minus Europe versus the American team. And the reason why it's minus Europe is because that is the Ryder Cup, which was obviously chronicled on Full Swing on Netflix for those that are kind of casual golf fans. But that's Europe, USA. This is everybody else not named USA or Europe versus the Americans for a similar title.
Yeah. Kind of ironic, though, that they have the President's Cup in a country that doesn't have a president.
Rebranding it the Prime Minister's Cup for a one-off cup of tea there, or what?
I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate there. It seems silly.
The amount of protesters that would be there if Trudeau got his own cup.
Oh my God.
We've brought up Trudeau. We've brought up Trump. All right. The new spin-off of the 1867 sports show, the Insurrection Show.
Yeah. We just want to get a bunch of different groups riled up over every single political, position in the world.
You know what? It's for the aggregators and the algorithm there. They're just picking up little sound bites from this there. The web crawlers, Trudeau, Trump, election.
You know what? We should start doing that. Just spam our episodes with just random keywords and buzzwords that just get people to tune in for that 1 second. And then it's like, oh, wait, I don't like this anymore. They're going to go somewhere else.
Michael Scott, when he's trying to impress the girl there, he's doing the presentation there. And then one of the slides for 0.5 seconds, sex.
Yeah, that's what we do here. But anyways, what was the question?
There was no question there, which was part of what really derailed us. But where we were trying to get to was with less than 2 weeks, no Canadians are part of the automatic 6 qualifiers, right? 12-person team. 6 of them will be automatically chosen because of how many points they've accumulated in the standings. The other 6, though, are all captain's picks. Now, you've got Corey Connors in at number 7, so right on that
Mr.
cut line. Yeah. Nick Taylor at 11, Adam Hadwin at 12, Taylor Pendrith at 13, and Mackenzie Hughes at 15 in those standings. So, of all those players that are eligible here, and Mike Weir has gone on record already in the weeks leading up to this saying, like, you know what, even if there aren't any who automatically qualify, there's strategy in having some homegrown talent. And, even if they were in the 20s or 30s, maybe sneaking one of them onto that roster was probably on his radar anyways. But given how many are close to making that cut already, how much maple syrup is going to be dripped on this roster when good old Mikey W fully assembles his 12-man unit?
I think you're seeing a minimum of 3, because I think you got Connors.
You're going 25%. Look at you.
Yeah. I think you're going Connors, Taylor, and Hadwin. I think are going to be automatics, whether they qualify or whether they're picked. And I think you can potentially see a Pendrith sneak in there as a 4th wild card. So I honestly think out of the group, you're literally going to have 3 of those players beyond the President's Cup team, possibly a fourth, depending on, like you're talking about, what type of strategy Mike Weir wants to employ.
Yeah. Well, and again, it gets really interesting if one of those players is able to sneak into the automatic qualifiers as well too, and then you're freeing up extra spots because again, you're probably wondering, well, weren't you guys just talking about how at, the Olympics, who's going to even qualify here? And these guys are ranked, whatever in the world. Why are they all of a sudden all top 15? Well, shows you how many good Americans and Europeans are on the tour because we're removing all of them from the equation here. So it's essentially Canadians and, South Americans and
Australia, yeah,
all of that stuff. So that's why you're seeing some of that cluster up there, right? And there obviously are some other names in there that are going to be absolute shoe-ins. But to your point, yeah, I think three is probably the number. If you start getting into four or more, that's where it's like, all right, you old Homer, you're just sandbagging it at this point. And but at the same time too, like Mike Weir, guess what? I don't know when he'll ever have this opportunity ever again. So
yeah,
do your thing. It's not like if you do a great job, they're bringing you back next year again too.
yeah,
They typically go with whoever is the host nation. They grab whoever their most famous retired golfer is and making them captain.
yeah. And I mean, I think the U.S. has been doing this for years, right? Where they'll take, the top automatic bids, and then the players that they take, they're not necessarily going to be the best suited golfers in regards to their position. They're basically who the coach deems to have an edge when they go play these tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who has a better edge to play at a golf tournament in Canada than Canadian golfers who've probably golfed at this course many times,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I'm with you in that point. Like, who gives a shit if I'm Mike Weir? I really don't care. What are they going to do? Oh, we're not going to bring
I'm
it back.
Mike Weir.
Yeah,
what do I care?
exactly. We're not going to bring it back to Canada for the next 10 years. Oh, no, not for another 10 years. I'm going to be completely out of golf by then. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Do what you got to do. If you want to have, like you're mentioning, you want to have the full Canadian breakfast and you've got maple syrup about, let's just go with the full bottle, right?
Yeah.
Let's get all six of them in there. We'll go 6 non-Canadians, 6 Canadians. Let's make a super team.
Yeah. If I can go out there and play best ball, I'll put my name in it as well too. But it's going to be interesting, and even on that kind of format there as well too. Like these are the events that really do bring in the casual fan and get
Yeah.
them hooked on a sport, right? Because anyone who follows the PGA Tour or Live, if that's your cup of tea, like it kind of goes through its typical cadence, right? It's like, okay, we got the practice rounds. Thursday they're teeing off. All right, Saturday we're half the field now. Okay, it's moving day. We're seeing who's jockeying for position, and Sunday, like it's got its ebbs and flows. Whereas in tournaments like the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup and those kinds of formats, where it's like, all right, it's best ball the first match, then it's match play, then it's Stableford, then it's like they've got all these little wrinkles into there, really does make it interesting because like Tiger Woods in his heyday, it's like, cool, I know that in a head-to-head matchup Tiger is going to win, so it's like, all right, let's just pencil it in for the Americans here. But it's not just Tiger that is accumulating points, right? He needed the Duvals of the world and the Davis Loves and the this that, like, to go out there and do their thing as well too. Otherwise the team aspect of it falls apart. And to a degree, I think that's what Liv was really trying to capture when they went with this weird team
Tournament
format
yeah.
that no one really likes, like even the hardcore Live fans. Like, okay, cool. If the league folded tomorrow, you wouldn't care 2 years from now that, oh, team golf is gone. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. So it's something that they failed to capture, but these one-off tournaments that only happen, right? Ryder Cup alternates years with President's Cup, do in such a good way. And so for the casual fan, like these are the events that you want to see. So, I mean, when you're tuning in there, what's your favorite event to watch? Do you like the more individualized stuff, or do you like when they actually do like twos versus twos? Or
yeah, no, I like the twos versus twos. So it kind of gives you the, like those specialized events that you see on TV. It's like the match, right? Where you've got a golfer with a celebrity playing against a golfer and a celebrity.
Yeah.
That's kind of what that, the vibe that gives off. And, there could be one guy who's just absolutely, firing BBs out there, like Tiger Woods in his prime. And then they pair him with their worst golfer, right? So that way they can kind of keep it up. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, oh man, like this guy's just absolutely, he's got the yips. He's hitting it off into the bushes. He's in the sand trap. And then Tiger's just saving him coming out of the bunker. Like this is kind of why you like that team format, because like you were mentioning with best ball, this is what a lot of us play, right? I don't go out and golf just to see how low I could score because I don't have time. Whenever I do golf, it's in a tournament, it's in a best ball format, and I'm probably drinking.
Yeah.
So when I see that, it kind of brings me back to what I like to do when I'm on the golf course, which is I get to rely on someone else to make a good shot if I absolutely suck.
Yeah. One out of the four of us couldn't possibly screw this up, right?
There's no worse feeling when you are the fourth out of your group to hit, and the first three have just utterly crapped the bed.
Yeah,
and they're so reliant on you. So, and that's your Masters moment, right? That's your President's Cup moment right there. I gotta pull us out of the fire here, and I gotta make sure I pipe one right down the fairway. So, more often than not, doesn't
totally redeem yourself.
Like I said, more often than not, it does not happen that way. However, yeah, I think that's where I kind of hone in on whenever I do watch these tournaments. I like the team aspect of it, and like you were mentioning, it's hard to capture, but if you do it right, it's very enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think that's wherein the kind of mystique lies with the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup and all that. If this was happening every single weekend, I think it could get old, right? But because it's only once a year that we get these guys together, and let's call it what it is, right? Like golf's a very buttoned down sport, and decorum and the rules and the sanctity of the game and all of that stuff. So when you are on the PGA Tour and, aside from the Waste Management Open, like they're pretty tame in their reaction. It's a little stuffy, right? So, these events, like the guys are fired up, like their personalities are coming out. Rory's starting fights in the parking lot with other guys' caddies. Like it's entertaining to see, and it's a nice kind of breath of fresh air for golf in general when you can kind of see the personality behind the guy whose swing has just been done 10,000 times and he's just a robot at this point.
Yeah. And let's not lose the sight of the fact that people love to see nation versus nation, whether it be Olympics, whether it be, World Cup of Hockey, whatever, whatever you're into. When you're watching your country compete against another country, your adrenaline gets going a little bit more. Right. So I think that's why these tournaments have been able to capture that fan base that Live just fails to capture, because, like, I don't care if I have the best guy from South Africa, the best guy from Spain, a random dude from Australia that are all playing for money against, a US guy from Fiji and then from, Slovakia. Right. I want
geography major over there.
Telling you, I'm not just a handsome gray bearded face. When I'm looking at it, look, you've got US, which obviously captures a lot of attention because that's the biggest media market in the world. Now you're bringing in, you say, the rest of the world, excluding Europe. Yeah. So you've got their neighbor to the north in Canada. So obviously you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on that. And then you've got all these different players peppered in from across the globe who are the top players in golf. So that, I think, brings more eyeballs to this thing than anything else. Is that, one, the format is different, but two, nations are competing. Whenever you got that, people look forward to it. People enjoy watching that stuff a little bit more.
No, absolutely. Speaking of nations competing against one
another, look at you. You're on fire tonight.
Little something called the Paralympics kicking off on Wednesday. So by the time this comes out, we'll refer to it as today. So
today,
they are the actual third largest sporting event in the world. So only the Olympics and the World Cup sell more tickets than the Paralympics do. And you wouldn't be able to tell based on the amount of television and media coverage they get, which I think is actually a shame. But it is an absolutely massive, massive deal. Obviously, it's over in France as well, too. One bit of housekeeping we're going to get out of the way with right now is how we are going to describe this, because I am taking verbiage right from the Paralympics website, Canada Paralympic website, New Zealand website, where they refer to the athletes as disabled athletes. So this is the words they're using. Don't come for us. If you don't
Yeah.
like us referring to them as disabled athletes, that's how they're branding themselves here.
Let's just call them athletes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But uh so 18 sports, 126 athletes are coming from Canada that we are representing here. And obviously starts on Wednesday, runs until September 8th. Last time out, 2020, Canada, middle of the pack, didn't have the greatest performance when you kind of stack it up historically, because don't know if you saw the graphic after the last Paris Olympics there for the USA. They've got something like 1,000 medals at this point, and the next closest person was like Germany with like 500. Canada actually has the third most Paralympic medals all time. So we're a nation that typically does pretty good at these events. However, last time out, only 21 total medals, 5 of which were gold in 2020, which finished well outside the top 10 in that regard. So big bounce back of a year coming, we are hoping here. But in terms of actual events coming up, like what one sticks out to you the most when you think of the Paralympic Games? What's the first event that kind of comes to mind for you?
You know, I look at where we've had success in the past, and I really kind of hone in on the throwing events in athletics, because I see a lot of, a lot of success coming from that. So I'm talking about shot put, discus, javelin.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 3 events that we've traditionally been very competitive in, dating all the way back to the 1980s. So you have a history of success, and like even looking at what we've done, as a country in the previous Olympics that just happened. I mean, hammer throw was obviously pretty good. There's a couple shot putters that didn't do as well as they were supposed to. It seems like we're a nation of throwers. We like to throw stuff. So, those are always the events that I like. I was always kind of drawn to those as a young lad whenever I was competing in track and field days, which, man, I miss those. Trying to compete for those colored ribbons and everything like that, brag to your friends the next day, like I got first in this, third in this, whatever it may be. But looking at where I'm probably going to be tuning in towards the Canadian contingent, it's probably the throwing events, because again, I'm more drawn to that than most other things.
Yeah. To me, it's always going to be wheelchair basketball,
Mm-hmm.
because it is probably the most highly documented event that the
Yep.
Paralympics has, right? There's the murder ball documentary. There's been all sorts of spin-offs from that as well too, and I think as well it's just got a little bit of a shock factor to it, where it's like, oh my god, did you see what just happened there? And just have him pop back up and he hits the 3 at the other
Yeah.
end of the court. So
Yeah.
yeah, to me that's kind of the, I guess, marquee event, where if you look at the summer games, it's probably like 100-meter dash, or men's basketball dream team or something like that. I kind of put this in the Paralympics kind of same sphere, because there is a lot of pomp and circumstance that goes behind it. And same thing again, where it's not just individual athletes, it's teams, it's representing nations. It's not just John Smith is competing in the javelin toss, it's Canada versus France in the
Yeah.
wheelchair basketball. So kind of ties in all of those elements that you love to see, with a little bit of physicality, with a sport that I think a lot of people can also wrap their heads around as well, right? Because there are some events where unless you've actually tuned into the Paralympics, you might have never even seen before, right? Like some of the modifications that they're making to these sports, with like goal ball, where everyone's blindfolded. So even if you aren't blind, you still have the same kind of parameters
Yeah.
around you. And then the ball's got, I don't know if it's bells or it's got some sort of shaking device
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you're trying to throw into the net. Like some of that stuff's a little bit foreign to you. Still exciting to watch,
Yep.
but I come back to the kind of old familiar, where it's like, all right, it's basketball. They just happen to be in wheelchairs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you were mentioning, there's a lot of different sports that you don't see
Mm-hmm.
in, the Olympics that you don't see, have professional leagues of. And that's what I think makes these things exciting. Because I mean, you look at in the wintertime, you're talking about like wheelchair rugby, wheelchair basketball. You're talking about, in the wintertime where Canada really excels as well, like sledge hockey.
Yeah.
Right? Go watch a game of sledge hockey and tell me that you don't love the way that that is played.
Yeah. I don't
Because
know how like people aren't losing limbs in that game, the way that they're colliding and these blades are flying around, and like I don't
yeah,
understand how there's not more sledge hockey related deaths on the six
yeah,
o'clock news.
and that just goes to show how talented they are
Yeah.
because it's such a dangerous sport, but they're able to do it at such a high rate of speed that it looks effortless to them, right? And while we're on the topic, shout out to good friend Mike Foligno for obviously being one of the coaches of the sledge hockey program in Canada and doing a great job with them. But yeah, like you're mentioning these kind of specialized sports. That's what makes these things exciting whenever you're watching the Paralympics versus the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
because there are these things that we don't see that just create this level of intrigue that again we don't have on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. And so some of these sports as well, too, like it's one of those things where you can almost relate to some of the sports if you're a non kind of athlete as well, because they have like modified bocce as well, too, for
Yeah,
those that are in, I think it's wheelchair bocce is kind of how they kind of phrase it, but it's not like the typical ball. It's kind of like a beanbag sack and stuff like that. So it's all things that obviously these people are doing it at such a high level that it's not just something anyone could pick up and do, but it's also a little bit more relatable than like, oh cool, that guy just did that in 8 seconds. Well, that would take me 8 times as long as that. So there's almost a more human element to it
yeah,
than when you're watching the Olympics, and it's almost zoo like when you're looking at some of these athletes where it's like you're a different species to be able to throw that far or do this that fast or whatever it is. Like the Paralympians seem to be more down to earth. They don't have the celebrity aura about them, right? Like I don't think the U.S. wheelchair basketball team is going to be sitting on a yacht docked off of Marseille like the Dream Team was there. Like they're just a much more relatable group of high level athletes.
yeah, 100%. And I think that's why whenever you have the regular viewer who's tuning into these things, it does become even more of kind of an in awe moment for people who are watching these things, because again what they're doing at such a high level is so impressive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you think about whether their whether the disability is like a loss of a limb or the fact that they have no sight or whatever it may be, like
Or that
this
one
is
ping pong player that is qualified for the Olympics and the racket is in his mouth and he is
yeah,
playing 1,000 times better than I could ever play if I had a paddle in both hands. Like it's
yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah, and that's the thing, like these are such high level athletes that it's so amazing to watch, because these are things that everyday folks like you and me would just kind of say, oh, I can't do it, right? I can't do it. And this is not define them. Like they've taken whatever this is and they've turned it into their strength, which is now on display for the whole world to see them competing at the highest level. So yeah, this is what I love about the Paralympics, is that these athletes are the best in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I say the best in the world because I'm sorry, there's a lot of regular athletes who don't have any disability that would not be able to do half the things that these
Mm-hmm.
other athletes in the Paralympics are doing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like we were just talking about with goalball, it's like, cool, you can throw a baseball 100 miles an hour. If I take away your ability to see, will you even be able to put this ball in that giant net, only 50 feet away from me? Probably not. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's very humanizing. It's impressive. I've got nothing but the utmost respect for
yeah.
all 126 athletes from Canada that are going over there, which clearly means we're bringing home 126 medals.
Of
Call clap
course.
to them. Right. There we go.
We're already setting the stage. We're setting the bar high for Team Canada. 126 medals and 126 athletes. Let's go.
Now, I didn't say 126 gold medals, so I'm giving them some wiggle room as long as it's on the podium. That's all that matters. But
That'll be acceptable.
yeah, that'll be acceptable. But if you're looking at kind of the pantheon of, using their terms here, disabled athletes, and this doesn't necessarily need to be Paralympians, but I think, for the purpose of this exercise, I think you and I both already agreed if we were making a Mount Rushmore of this ilk of athlete, you know, Terry Fox and what he did,
Yep.
he's up there. Rick Hansen, the man in motion, he's up there. But now there's kind of two spots, right? So we figured if we were going to go through the history of whether they're Paralympic athletes or just people who have made giant impacts on Canadian sports who are differently abled or disabled or however the verbiage is these days, like what are those two spots looking like for you to join good old Rick and Terry?
I had a lot of competition for these two spots.
A whole wad.
Yeah, I had to make some very difficult decisions. Lost a lot of good athletes along the way, but I came down to two.
Okay.
Because the resumes are so impressive that I couldn't not put them on this list. So, first of which, Joanne Burden.
Okay.
So, for those who don't know who this is, I already made mention of the events that she is actually specialized in. We're talking about the throwing events in athletics.
She's a chucker.
So, yeah, exactly. So, shot put, discus, and javelin. So, she had cerebral palsy, but she has also won gold medals in her class for shot put, discus, and javelin in 4 separate world championships, 2 of which being Olympics, right? The Paralympics. So in 1988, she won gold medals in shot put, discus, and javelin. Not bad. 1990 World Championships in Holland, she won gold medals in shot put, discus, and javelin. 1992 Barcelona Olympics.
Shot put, discus, javelin, gold.
Three gold medals, shot put, discus, and javelin.
I'm sensing a pattern with her here.
Sensing a pattern, exactly. So again, she was a finalist for the Canadian Female Athlete of the Year. Okay. So not disabled athlete of the year. She was a finalist for the Canadian Athlete of the Year. Super impressive. She was also the King Clancy Award winner, which for those of you who don't know what that is, that's from the Canadian Foundation for Physically Disabled Persons. So she basically was, given the award for being the most athletic disabled person in Canada. So that's why Joanne Burden is one of my Mount Rushmore athletes. Okay. So I'm not done because I still have one more thing that I want to say. She still holds the world records for shot put, discus, and javelin.
Okay, I can see what the case that you're trying to build here for why she might be up there.
Yeah.
Let's get a quick little golf clap for Joanne there.
For Joanne. And honestly, like she's gone on to to coach as well. So I mean, not only is she a high level athlete, she's now passing on her wisdom to those youngsters who were coming up after she was done. So I always love to see that. Yeah. My second person, Michael Edson, who was
I love it. We didn't compare lists, and I'm always nervous that we're going to hop on here and have the exact same two. I went with 2 different people, so
perfect.
Continue.
Good for us. You know what? We're kindred minds. We're kindred minds. But when I look at Michael's resume, it's just as impressive as Joanne's because he's one of the most decorated athletes in Canadian history, and he's a visually impaired swimmer. But what he was able to accomplish was capture 18 gold medals, 3 silver medals, and set 9 world records over 3 Paralympic Games.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. So again, same time frame as Joanne. 1988, won 9 gold medals while breaking 4 world records along the way. So you talk about these swimming achievements that we're seeing with Summer McIntosh and Michael Phelps before. Like, think about that. 9 gold medals and 4 world records in one Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's insane. Like you cannot get any better than that. So I mean, just for that alone, Michael Edson is absolutely, for me, on that Mount Rushmore. But I mean, you're looking at, he was the BC Disabled Athlete of the Year on 3 occasions. He was a finalist for the Canadian Athlete of the Year award in 1992 as well. So again, when you have 2 disabled athletes who are in the running for Athlete of the Year, competing against NHL players, NFL players, MLB players, Olympians, like, this is the level of talent that these people have, right? So I mean, I look at those 2 individuals as being such high level athletes that they're setting records at the grandest stage. They're winning medals in their events every time, they're either throwing a shot put or, competing in a swimming event. This is exactly what we talk about when we say Mount Rushmore is greatness. And you can't get any more great than the 2 people that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Kyle, who do you have as the other 2 members of your Canadian Mount Rushmore?
Well, I also went with 1 male, 1 female. And I'm going to continue your trend of swimmers here. And I'm going to go with Mr. Tim McIsaac, who has 28 medals, 14 of which are gold. Now, the number 28 in terms of Olympic lore is pretty famous because there was a certain swimmer south of the border, Mr. Michael Phelps, who also happens to be the most decorated athlete of all time. And he himself also had 28 Olympic medals. So neck and neck with him right there. He was swimming between 1976 and 1988, 17 medals at the World Games as well. So we're talking 28 at the Paralympics, 17 at the World Games. You got 45 between them. Again, a blind swimmer, and he kind of pioneered I think it was a tapping mechanism is essentially what they called it there. But again, anyone who's watching swimming, if you're doing length swimming, you've got to do either touch the wall and then go back, or what the professionals do is they do the flip. He was the first blind athlete to develop a regular ability to do, they call it a tumble, I guess is the technical swimming term here if we want to get serious about it, but that little flipperoo and then head back the other way. So pioneered something that now all the athletes are doing in the pool there, regardless of whether they're blind or not. So impacted his game in a big way, but also has the most career medals of any Canadian Paralympic athlete, regardless of sport. So big ol' golf clap to Mr. Timmy McIsaac there on my Mount Rushmore. And then heading over to spot number 4, Chantal Petitclerc. See, it's the French names I can do well with, but Felix, I don't know. There's something beyond just French in that last name that I'm struggling with.
Well, you're referring to him as a ice cutting device. Felix Auger.
Yeah, absolutely. Serves a purpose. But Chantal, 21 medals between 1992 and 2008. So you look at, again, longevity.
Yeah.
That is a long time to be competing at an Olympic level there, but not only competing, but was also bringing home medals every step of the way that she was going, right? Most of any Canadian woman in Paralympic history, first Canadian woman with a disability to win the Lou Marsh Award, and that happened in 2009. So again, we're talking about competing against the NBA, NHL, MLB, all the professional leagues, WNBA, all of that. She was Canada's best athlete in 2009. 2010 Canadian Sports Hall of Fame inductee. She was a wheelchair racer, did all sorts of different lengths as well too. So she was one that was versatile in both sprints and distance. I think she did a little bit better in kind of like the 1500 meter seemed to be her sweet spot there. But again, that versatility, the longevity, the fact that, again, the voters and her peers that are actually casting ballots for the Lou Marsh Award here recognized her as disability, no disability, whatever it is, you are the best athlete across every single sport in this country for this year. So she was my pick to be that fourth spot there. But all four of them that we've talked about tonight, unbelievable athletes. And this is the type of stuff that you will see if you actually do tune into the Paralympics.
Yeah.
So, on the one hand, golf clapped of the four we talked about. And on the other hand, stern dad look to these media companies that are not covering the Paralympics and doing the justice that these athletes deserve. Let's get them on one of the 400 TSN channels there throughout the day. You've got hours to fill, people. Let's go.
Like, I don't want to watch darts. I'm sorry. Like,
I don't want to watch a rerun of the Professional Bull Riders League that has already happened. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, no, 100%. We've made mention of this several times already in this show, but an athlete deserves a platform. What better platform to showcase their skills than on the national television circuit? And national television is aplenty in Canada, as we have TSN and Sportsnet and CBC, who are all capable of broadcasting it on one of their multiple iterations, whether it's CBC Gem or Sportsnet 360 or one of these off-kilter TSN channels. Put them on. People will watch. If you want to grow the sport, put it on TV.
Yeah. And that's just it. Like, you ask a lot of those that actually work in the sports media industry, like, this is their dead time, right? Like, you've got some most of the golf's major events other than the President's Cup are like wrapped up at this point. So you don't have
NFL hasn't started yet.
Right? We're not in the playoffs for the CFL. MLB is in the weird spot where it's like it's not so close to the end of the season that every game matters, but
people are still tired from the grind of June and July and whatnot.
And at least 15 of the franchise's fan bases are like, well, we're 40 games out of first place, like a Chicago White Sox.
They've been waiting to watch something other than the Chicago White Sox since May.
Yeah.
So, and then again, like NBA, NHL, not even starting their training camps yet. So what are we doing here? Media conglomerates. I mean, we're out there, Amazon signing the Kelsey brothers to these $100 million podcast deals. Hey, throw this event on one of your streaming stations, one of your streaming platforms. This is exactly what you need. And again, here's job number 793 that the Dine Sports Group can do. We'll go out and we'll do all the coverage for the Paralympics.
Yeah.
Give us this money. We'll go do it. And we'll make sure that everything gets the support that they need. So there you go, Kyle. Another one that I've signed you up for.
There you go. And this is a complete drive-by on them, but it's the perfect example. Like, I don't need to see friggin' Jesse Pollock and the Bar Down guys do another top 20 stupid whatever, viral moments from weeks 1 through 6 of the CFL. Like, I don't care. Like these late night countdown like style stuff that you always see so much over the holiday breaks because everyone's on vacation and no one's really watching TV during Christmas. They're all watching either a bowl game or they're getting drunk off eggnog and rum somewhere at a family function. So they just put on all these countdowns. Like, why are we watching these across multiple channels here? Right? Like, I'm not saying, trust me, I get it, the whole numbers and eyeballs and all of that. But it's the same thing that people were always saying about, oh, women's sports will never work. Women's sports will never work. You give them a platform and all it has been is sell out, record breaking this, record viewership, that, record merchandise sale. It's like, put them on, doesn't even need to be a 10th of the coverage that you're giving the NHL, but you give them 5% instead of 0%. Watch that 5% grow. And that's how you get people to tune into it. And you'll stumble into something that all of a sudden will drive viewership. Like, it's not complicated, people.
Yeah. An athlete is an athlete is an athlete. Simple.
Yep. And especially for the Sportsnets and the TSNs and the CBCs of the world who pride themselves on telling those Canadian stories. Like, all right, tell them. These are Canadians. We got over 100 of them over there competing at the highest level.
Yeah.